And the other thing I just want to say is that please remember that if you're going to a physician and the physician says, I don't know, but I'll Google it, or I'm not sure, but I'll come up with something. And a lot of times, as educators, we may kind of do that, where we're just flying off the cuff, or going off of experience, or going off of stuff that we remember from schemas from us growing up. And if we're going to be the top-notch, best of the best professionals that our kids really need in this time, we probably ought to use stuff that's proven. We probably ought to use stuff that has been tested. So it's incumbent upon us then to learn and to know what works, why it works, what are the underlying principles, and to really be ready to do what our young people need. To dial that in, Amy's going to work with this process with us, but I just encourage you as a second component, head to the Midwest PBIS website, check out all the great content there, sign up for their coaching newsletters, and you do not have to go through Finger Lakes Community Schools to get to Midwest PBIS. You can access them directly, and I encourage you to do so. Amy, all yours.
Thanks, Jay. So welcome, everyone. My name is Amy Flamini. As Jay said, I work for the Midwest PBIS Network. I live in Springfield, Illinois, where it's cold and very, very gray today. Not snowing yet, soon to be snowing. We don't get near as much as you get, so I'm not going to complain about the snow. I'm a school social worker by training. I worked in rural schools as a school social worker for a cooperative for 12 years. So I started in 1994. The last 5 of those 12 years, I worked in alternative school, where I fit really well because I'm kind of alternative. I could fit in there. And then I went to work for Springfield City Schools for 3 years. And the last 2 years of that 3-year stint, I was the wraparound trainer and coach for Springfield Public Schools. We were part of a federal grant project doing research around wraparound. So after that, I started working for the Illinois PBIS network and focused on RAP and high schools, and the other areas were of course on my plate, but high schools and wraparound have really been tier 3 have really been my special areas. So after I was at the Illinois network, it got really political and it dissolved. So I went to work for DCFS for 1 year, and I coordinated their state internship program. And then I've been with Midwest PBIS for the last 7 years. And I came over to Midwest, crawling back, actually, begging them to take me back. But anyway, I came back to Midwest PBIS network, and one of the main reasons I came back was because we were part of a federal grant about how to do wraparound in high schools with a project called Renew. So we're going to talk about those things today. So I do have a couple of dogs and a husband who Zooms from home too. So if background noise gets to be a problem, let me know. I think it will be fine. So the next slide is just going to show you a little bit about the Illinois or the Midwest PBIS network. Let's see, somebody maybe isn't muted. All right, got it. I think I got you. Okay. The Midwest PBIS network, we're a very small network. There's 9 or 10 of us, and I can never remember which one. And we're a hub of the National PBIS Center. So the National PBIS Center is funded from the Office of Special Education Programming in the Department of Ed at the federal government level. And we have been a technical assistance center we're finishing our 5th 5-year cycle. So we're the longest standing technical assistance center out of that office. So, and the reason we are longest standing technical assistance center really has to do with the research that we can show that the work that we're talking about does work. So enough about me and the Midwest PBIS network. I would like to just as a reminder, let you know that we're supposed to go from 1 to 3 today, and then 3 to 3:30 your time for questions and answers. We're a small enough group. This may not be right. We might be finished a little earlier, and I'm going to encourage you to really ask questions as we go along. I will be available afterwards. So if you have something that you wanted to talk about individually, we can do that. So I saw some things in chat, and I'm going to have you all do this for me in chat. Would you put what you want? Well, let me tell you about today first, and then I'm going to ask you to put in chat what it is you want to get from today. So as Lori and Jay advertised, this is an overview of the core components of Tier 3 work. So you're not going to walk away being ready. Like, you're not going to walk out of here and do wraparound. This is just an overview, a readiness kind of time together, so that you can see you can hear what wraparound and renew look like, and you can hear what you need to have in place to make it work. So I'm going to give you things. If you want to do wraparound or renew, I'm going to give you things that you could leave and do, but you're not going to be a trained facilitator after a few hours. So we're going to talk about what these interventions look like, what systems need to be in place, what kind of facilitators we're looking for when we think about a RAP facilitator, and the qualities of the facilitator that need to be in place. So Sherry, I think you are going to not get much of that today. You'll get a little bit of an overview. So hopefully there'll be something in here that will be helpful for you. All right, let's see. Anything else anybody wants to put in chat that they are wanting to walk away with today? Okay, these are great. So as we get started, I do want you to know that wraparound is an evidence-based intervention. It has great research behind it. So I want you to know that first. So I'm going to have you write 4 things down, because they don't fit in objective style, but they fit in Amy language. And I'm going to summarize the next couple of hours in these 4 sentences, or these four phrases. Okay, I want you to write them down, because I want you to be able to refer to them when you leave here. 1, Tier 3 work is overwhelming at first. The second thing, wraparound is very doable and it works. The next one is that the facilitator has to want to do the work. The opposite of that is us assigning humans to do this who don't want to do it. And the last.
Can you repeat that last one?
Sure. Facilitators have to want to do the work.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you.
Sure. And then finally, you will need to have a systems conversation at least once a month. So that's the summary.
Repeating the first one quickly.
Sure, absolutely. I was going to actually do that. So it's overwhelming at first. So be ready for overwhelm. Wraparound is very, very doable, and it works when you do it with fidelity. I elaborated a little there. The third one was the facilitator has to want to do the work. And the last one was you're going to need to have a systems conversation at least once a month. So those are the 4 key things that I can tell you about wraparound and renew as we move forward. So when we were part of the federal grant project with Renew, I was able to provide coaching and co-facilitation with people who were doing Renew. And I learned a lot about how important it is that the facilitator wants to do the work. So I'm going to just say that again. the facilitator has to want to do this. Otherwise, it's bad for kids. So, because if this starts and stops because we have a facilitator who doesn't want to do it, it can be pretty devastating for kids and families. So let's talk a little bit about getting grounded in the PBIS triangle or MTSS, however you want to say it. So it's important to remember that we do know things about kids who have tier 3 level needs. We do know that kids who have tier 3 level needs need a predictable environment. We know they need a clear, direct expectations. We know the system needs to be strengths-based. It needs to feel safe. And there need to be a high level of prompts. So just for a second, I'm not going to ask you to report out unless somebody would like to. I'd like for you to reflect on predictable, clear, strengths-based, safe, and high levels of prompts. Then I want you to think of a student who has very high level needs in your building. And I want you to think about whether or not you have predictable, clear, strengths-based, safe, and high levels of prompts. One of the things that's interesting is that we've known a really long time what kids who have emotional behavioral disorder or challenges need. We know what works. It's just getting it in place that's the challenge. So I would suggest to you that getting the systems in place to do this is the hardest part, which is what I would teach you if we were doing tier 1 PBIS training. It's the systems, right? It's the grown-ups. It's getting everybody on the same page, getting everybody moving in the same direction. So since 2006, it's been very clear what kids with an emotional behavior disorder or challenge need. They need academic supports. They need help with real world employment if they're old enough. They need self-determination skills, meaning they have some sense that they have some control over their existence, as well as what their future is going to look like. There needs to be a positive social network. And if they're in high school, we need to have a pretty specific plan around career and post-high school employment. So those are all the things that are super easy to say and super hard to do. Would you raise your fake hand or real hand and tell me how many of you are implementing PBIS? All right, I see 1, 2. I've got a fake hand there, 3, 4, 5. Great, thank you. All right, thank you. I feel like 5 of, how many of us are there? 12? 16, 17. I feel like 5 of 17. I'm going to go with it. That's a really high percentage. So thank you for participating. So here's the thing. I'm going to do some just basic PBIS messages just to make sure we're on the same page with language. So whenever we talk about PBIS, we're always coming back to data systems and practices. Data systems and practices. And what I mean by that is we're going to use data to make decisions. We're going to have evidence-based practices in place for kids, which is Renew and RAP are an example of that. And we're going to have systems in place so grown-ups can do their jobs. We want to use data to make decisions, evidence-based practices for kids, and we want to make it so grown-ups can actually do the work, right? We know educators are fleeing at rapid pace out of the system, and we need to make sure that our systems work so grown-ups can do the work. So when you think about this, it's constantly looking for where we can improve and where we can make sure that we're serving all the kids who have needs. So when I talk to somebody who's not an educator, what I say to them about PBIS is I say we do this so that we have kids who are socially and emotionally competent and can do their best academically. So we're looking for an equitable environment where kids can become socially and emotionally competent, and do their best academically. So it's a pretty straightforward, why are we doing this? So I want you to notice that I did not say anything about warm, fuzzy, positive tickets. I did not say anything about using high voices constantly, being positive. I didn't say any of that. I said data systems practices. So a lot of us have experienced, me included, working in places where the application of PBIS was really wonky. And so that's why I want to make sure that we have some of this kind of common language. Fancy slides. All right. So I also want to remind you, if you already know, or if you don't know, this will be new, obviously. The PBIS triangle is not really a PBIS triangle. The PBIS triangle is a public health triangle. So this work came from the public health model, which is a prevention model. And so the way you can look at this, one way you can look at this is academics on the left, behavior on the right. And if we teach with fidelity and we use evidence-based practices, 80 to 90% of the youth are going to be able to respond to what we're teaching them. And then about 5 to 15% are going to need a second layer of support. And about 1 to 5% are going to need a third level of support. So today, our focus area is on that 1 to 5%. If you're leaving here today thinking about starting to do tier 3 work, what I would tell you is think 1%. What's 1% of your school population? If you are in a large high school, I would say, what's 1% of your 9th grade population? Or what's 1% of your 10th grade population? So we're going to have to start small. We know that when we start tier 3, we have to start small. When we do tier 3, there's more data. When we do tier 3, there's more time. When we do tier 3, there's more engagement with family and community. So tier 3 work, as I said earlier, at the beginning is overwhelming, but I can promise you that it is doable. So I work in a district, not in Illinois, and they currently have, they made a decision that their district-wide, all of their counselors, it's a pretty large district, all of their counselors were going through RAP training. And they were all going to do RAP. That was part of their job description is we're going to do RAP. So we've trained 24 people. They currently have 17 who've started RAP. I met with them last week and I said, so about how long is this taking you? And one person said, oh, well, the week I have a meeting, probably 2 hours, an hour for the meeting and an hour prep. That is an example of how that counselor was already spending a boatload of time with that kid and family. So she was continuing to do that. She was just organizing it through the meeting and getting some systems in place. So when I say it's overwhelming, I just want you to know that at first it feels like there's no way we can do this. And then you get trained and you actually start the work and you're like, this really is not a big deal. So I want to remind you of that. It's very, very doable. So here's an example and a demonstration that whenever we are moving up the triangle, what I want you to remember is that we're always layering on top of. So all kids get tier 1 and about 80% are going to respond. About 15% are going to get tier 2. Notice it's piled on top of tier 1. And the third area of the triangle up there, 5% are going to get that third layer. And I want to point out to you, and I know that this seems like this is not rocket science. We build on top of it. So on tier 1 goes tier 2 interventions. On tier 2 and tier 1 interventions go tier 3 interventions. This is really important because when we are doing tier 3 work, what we often find is we find kids in the boat where they aren't getting the lower level interventions. Somehow we skipped them in tier 2. And I know what it is. I mean, I think I know what it is. I think I know that it is those interventions aren't going to work with that kid and then they just don't get done. And then we find out they're not even getting tier 1 supports. Like they're always out of class during social emotional learning time. They're out of class during activities related to that. They're not getting acknowledgements. They're not getting tier 1. So it has to be layered on top of. We're talking about few. So another way to say this is all, some, and few. We're talking about the few. We're talking about 1 to 5% of your building population. So another way to look at this is that you take all your population, general ed and special ed, and you provide all youth with tier 1 supports. We're putting prevention systems in place for all youth. So what those prevention systems look like, what that teaching looks like, and what you're teaching is based upon your school and community data. After this is one way of doing this, that kids who aren't responding at tier 1, meaning they're not doing okay, and you as a team decide what not responding means. One way to do this is that those kids automatically go into check in, check out without having a team meeting. If you're new to this work, check in, check out is a low level tier 2 intervention intended to be for kids who are at risk. And then, so we didn't need a meeting. We don't need a meeting. We just know they hit this data point, they go into tier 2. And then if they're in check in, check out and they're not working, what we would do is ask the educator, who we would say outside of the family is main stakeholder, right? Probably knows the most outside of the family about the youth. We would ask that educator use their function-based thinking, which means we might have to teach them what that means, to determine if the student should have a group layered on, or if we should intensify check-in, check-out. So still getting tier 1, still getting check-in, check-out. And then should we layer on, what should we layer on next? Function-based thinking means that your educators can think in terms of, there's always a reason behind behavior. Kids get or get away from something. You and I get or get away from something every time we engage in behavior. So educators need to know that, so they can write good behavior plans in their classroom. They can do ABC charts in their classroom. And also so they can make decisions like this. If a kid's not responding to check in, check out, which is, I mentioned low level for kids who are at risk. It's where kids check in with an adult in the morning. It's not mentoring. It's, hey, how you doing? How's your soccer game? Do you have all your materials? Great, have a good day. Then they go to their classroom, and at the end of every class period or block or whatever however you're sectioned, the classroom teacher gives that student feedback. And it's quick feedback, and it's not nasty, and it's not snarky. It is very, very direct feedback. Like, Kayla, I'm so glad you were in the room today. I saw you had your hands on Robin. Our expectation is that we show safety by keeping our hands to ourselves. I'm going to give you a 1. And then I would go through whatever our school-wide expectations were. So no room for argument. We're talking 30 seconds, 45 seconds at the end of each class period. And then at the end of the day, the youth goes to the checkout person, hopefully who's the same person they had in the morning, not always. So it's a lot of work to get it set up, but once it's set up, it's like a well-oiled machine. So if a kid is acting out because they want to get away from adult behavior, we don't want a teacher who says, oh, well, we need to increase the amount of adult attention he's getting. If the function of his behavior is to get away from adults, then we don't want to add more adults. We might need to have a group where we provide him some problem-solving skills or something else. So we need to know that all educators are starting to think in terms of function. So after we have tier 1, a couple of tier 2 interventions as demonstrated here, then we would start looking at doing functional behavior assessment and behavior intervention planning. And then we would look at wraparound or renew if you're in high school. Can you tell me how many of you are from high school? I mean, I want to know if I should start saying, okay, perfect. Okay. So all of these things, you want to set up a system where all of these lower level things are in place so that you have kids get the opportunity to respond to those lower level interventions before you put all the work into and time and energy into doing a tier 3 intervention. There are always exceptions to this rule. Kid had a fire and brother died in one of my districts. We're not going to wait till we start check in, check out. We're going to go to wrap. Or I have one building who does psychiatric hospitalizations. So if a kid's had 3 psychiatric hospitalizations, they automatically go to wraparound. So this is all set up by your team. So the reason we talk about readiness is because there have to be some systems in place in order for us to get this to work. So we know, if you back up to those PBIS slides, one of the things that we know is that districts need to have a district team that oversees the work. A district needs to have a district team, ideally a district and community team, that oversees all of the PBIS work, including tier 3. Here's why that's so important at tier 3. Because if I work in a school district where the social work supervisor wants everyone to do RAP, but doesn't make everyone do RAP, we may have a problem in terms of one person across the town is not doing it because they don't want to, and another person is doing it because they're supposed to. And we may end up needing to have conversations about job descriptions. We may need to have conversations about work and study, like work study programs for kids in high school. There are some policy things that are going to come up, undoubtedly. And you want to have that tier 3, you want to be ready to have that conversation at the district level. So I'm going to put that aside. We're going to talk readiness for tier 3 right now at the building level. At the building level, you're going to need to have a team that talks about systems. It doesn't mean you start a new team. It means that somewhere in one of those conversations that you already have a meeting, where you're already meeting, we're going to need to have a systems conversation added. So this says team. What I want you to hear is conversation. You have to have a systems level conversation, and I'm going to go into why in a minute. We have to have data, and we have to have access to our data. And we know that we're going to need a facilitator, some coaching support, and some other resources. I'm going to give you, before we wrap up today, I'm going to give you an actual district readiness checklist and a building readiness checklist that you can go through after we're finished today. So let's talk at the building level. Building level teaming systems. I'm not exactly sure what to call this because everyone has a different name for these. So there are 2 types of teams when we do tier 3 work. There's a systems conversation team, and then there's an individual student team. So there's some group of grown-ups having a conversation about how many kids need RAP, how many are getting RAP, how many are responding to RAP, and what kind of problems are we having. They're the problem-solving team around RAP, basically. They do other things. They can do other things, but that's one of their jobs. So people call this different things. They call it the tier 3 systems team, a leadership team, a multidisciplinary team. I mean, there's a long list of what people call this. I want you to remember that you have to have tier 3 systems conversations somewhere or the work stops. So you have this systems conversation team, whatever that is, maybe that you added to someone else's agenda who's already meeting. And then each individual student who gets tier 3 is going to have their own team. What's interesting at tier 3 is their own team does not mean the IEP team. It doesn't mean a standard set of humans that are already meeting. It means a team designed around that youth. So we're going to talk about what that really looks like in a minute. So I have a slide in here that is tier 3 systems team. Remember, you can think conversation on the left and then individual student teams on the right. I'm going to pause, let you read that slide, and I'm going to take a drink of tea. You will get the PowerPoint. So on the left, you have adults talking about how the system of tier 3 is working. On the right, you have each individual kid who has a tier 3 intervention. They have their own team. So as I mentioned, there are all these different kinds of names for this systems conversation. In that systems conversation, you're going to want to have someone who has some expertise around behavior. So whether that's somebody who has applied behavioral expertise, or has expertise with agency work, or has expertise with providing formal tier 3 supports, but you're going to want somebody who has some behavioral expertise in that conversation. Ideally, in addition to that person with expertise in that systems conversation, you have an administrator, whoever your behavior coach is, people who have basic problem solving knowledge, people who provide tier 3 supports to kids, and that your building is well represented. So most schools already have a team that looks like this. They may not be talking about tier 3 systems, but they already have it. So it's probably, for most people, just adding a conversation to some team's agenda. I want to point out to you, the administrator piece is absolutely crucial and challenging. It's challenging because administrators, like teachers, are pulled a million directions. And I can tell you, without the administrator at this table, it won't work. So Audrey is in a high school. Sorry, I said that right as you took a bite. That was so bad on my part. At the high school level, when I coached Renew, which is the high school application of wraparound, when I coached Renew, there were like 8 or 9 counselors, social workers, psychologists, counselors, clinicians, we'll just call them, who were told they were going to do Renew because they were part of a federal grant project. I can tell you, none of them wanted to do Renew, but they were told they were going to do Renew. And so what they would do is they would send kids passes to come down and do work with them for tier 3, and the kids wouldn't show up. And so the facilitator, counselor, clinician would just be like, they didn't show. This went on for months before we figured out this was what was going on. And we had to have that administrator at the table for him to say, what? Are you kidding me? That's not how we do business. You're going to go find that kid. If you can't go find that kid, I'm going to go find that kid, right? Like we had to have the voice of, we had to have that voice at the table, because that's what comes up. Or you end up in this conversation realizing that you have facilitators who haven't seen their kids or their families for months. Not because they're bad humans. They either really got busy and forgot, or they didn't want to do it to begin with. But these are the kinds of conversations. Conversations about home visits come up. We need to have the administrator at the table. Conversations about meeting families at McDonald's comes up. Conversations about meeting subs comes up. This is the group of humans who does all that work. So they're like the tier 3 protectors. So their job is going to be looking at data. So what's 1% of our building? Do we have that many kids getting tier 3? 1 to 5%. Are our facilitators, our RAP and Renew facilitators, are they getting the support they need? Do we need to get something off their plate so they can do this? Are we using all the resources we have? And are we making sure that kids are fully supported and opportunities are equitable? They're also going to look at how many kids get tier 3 interventions and how many kids are responding to those interventions. So for example, we have 10 kids getting wraparound. That's like dream come true for Amyville. We have 10 kids getting wraparound, and 8 of them are responding to their goals. Great, the system is working. If we have 10 kids getting wraparound and no one knows if kids are responding, we have a problem. Or if they say, oh, only 2 are responding, we have a systems problem. We have a grown-up problem that we have to go address. So their job is hard. I would say that when I was a tier 3 coach in Springfield, one of the Illinois network people who supported me for RAP, I said, the building canceled their tier 3 meeting and I don't really know what to do about it. And her response was, so all their tier 3 systems are working beautifully? All the kids in tier 3 are responding? Because that's the only reason you would cancel a meeting. I mean, unless there's an emergency, right? But they just canceled it because they didn't think they had anything to talk about. One of the things we learned from the Renew federal project was that systems team is a make or break. It makes or breaks the work. So now we're going to talk about kids who get their own individual team. So there are way too many words on that slide. I'm sorry about that. What I'm going to do is actually going to do is skip a couple of things here and go into some of these practices so you start to hear what, we'll go back to that if we have time, but what I want you to hear what wraparound looks like and what wraparound and renew looks like. So the key practices that are listed on the National PBIS Center website are, the way they list it are function-based assessments and behavior intervention planning, and they list it as person-centered planning and wraparound. What I'm suggesting to you is that people talk about this in a lot of different ways. The way I hope you will leave thinking about this is that wraparound and renew are both forms of person-centered planning. Person-centered planning was started in the 60s, 70s with adults who had developmental disabilities. And what happened was advocates started recognizing that they didn't have a voice in what their life looked like. And they didn't have a voice in really, really important parts of their life. And so they developed a person-centered plan where that person was, I know this sounds funny, the center of the plan. And that person drove the plan. So wraparound and renew are both actually types of person-centered planning. So we're going to talk about wraparound and renew as tier 3 interventions, which they are, and we're going to talk about them with the umbrella term of them being person-centered planning. Lots of different types of person-centered planning. There's not a million, there's probably 20 different types of person-centered plans. Within our PBIS world, we focus on wraparound, and then we focus on wraparound can be done at the high school. I did wraparound as a clinician in the high school. And then renew at the high school level is one we can talk about. The good thing about all of this work is that it's done in phases. So when you go through facilitator training, you have a kid who gets referred for a tier 3 intervention and he's matched up with Katie, and then Katie knows what to do in phase 1, engagement and getting ready for a team. And then Katie will know when it's time to move to phase 2, which is getting a plan together. And then Katie will know when it's time for phase 3, which is we're just kind of plugging along. And then Katie will know when it's time for phase 4, which is the transition phase. So wraparound is a process. It's an intervention, it's a process. Wraparound is, I thought that I had that in here, but I might have to put it in a chat at the end, but there's a national wraparound initiative. The website is NWI, National Wraparound Initiative. I'll get it for you before you go. And as you can see here, if you compare the two, we're matching up with what the National Wraparound Initiative says, which is that this is based on 10 principles. It's done in 4 phases, and we're focusing on self-efficacy and determination. So what I want to tell you is what it looks like. So I'm going to pretend that Robin, can I use you? You don't have to come off mute or anything. All right, this is pretend, right? We're role playing, but you're just nodding. Okay. Robin, this is Amy from over at the school. How are you? She nods, says she's fine. And then I say, Robin, you know, what we're doing at school isn't working for Kayla. And we know that. And we want to try something different. And there's a process called wraparound that I'd like to meet with you about and tell you about and see if you'd be interested in it. So what we're doing isn't working is very intentional. It's what I would train you to say if you were going to be a facilitator. So then I would say, Robin, could you give me a half an hour? I can meet you at McDonald's right next to your office. So I go meet Robin, which maybe meant I had to go to a district meeting to get it okay for me to leave campus. That happens in some places. So I go to meet Robin at McDonald's and I buy her a cup of coffee and I tell her, okay, so this is a process where I meet with you again and I hear about all the strengths of your family and of your student. And then you tell me if there are areas where you think there are needs or challenges. And then what we do is we create a group that kind of wraps around you and your student. And we work on whatever you want us to work on. So you are always driving the bus. And so then they would say, it's very rare that someone says no. So then Robin and I, sorry, Robin, your head moved, over a box. Robin and I would then set up another time to meet, and it would probably be a few hours. It is unlike any other meeting you've ever had with a parent. It is getting to know them in a different way. It's not a social history. I'm not asking when he walked. I'm not asking when he talked. I'm not asking if he's had head injuries. I am getting to know Robin and her family. So sometimes that's 40 minutes and sometimes that's 3 hours split up in meetings. So that's called a coffee chat. And it is part of what we do is wrap around where we get the strengths and needs of the family. It is really, people don't tend to believe me until they do it, but it's a really different experience than you've ever had because you go in without much agenda and you're not trying to get them to do anything. You're just really trying to get to know them and know what they think and know what they think they need. So it could be that Robin's kid is spitting and kicking on the playground. And so normally I would try to get Robin to talk about what we need to do about kids spitting and hitting on the playground. This meeting isn't about that. This meeting is, Robin, tell me what's working at home. Tell me what life is like. What's family like? What do you guys like to do for fun? What's your work schedule? How do you do that? What has worked before with your student? When have you seen things go really well? It's a conversation that is just like having coffee with somebody you just met. So then what happens is, okay, it's the bring, then it's the coffee chat. And then I'm gonna help Robin come up with a group of people who she and her child want on a team. So this is hard because a lot of kids who have high level needs don't have a lot of support. And a lot of families who have high level needs don't have a lot of support, but we work on this in training. This is one of the reasons you need coaching or support when you do this work, because you need help, you need thought partners. So what would happen is I would walk through different ideas with Robin. And let's pretend that Robin she's not involved at the community at all. And she has one person at work she's close to and the babysitter across the street who watches the kids after school. So Robin says, well, I guess I could ask my friend at work because they support me. And then I guess the babysitter. All right, so that might start out to be the team. Or I may say, hey, I know this great person over at Youth Service Bureau who would be a really good person to have on a team. What if we invite that person and they come to the team meeting, and if you don't end up liking them, we won't have them back. Or I set up a meeting with them in advance because this person is so knowledgeable about the community resources. Or it's grandma, or it's brother, or it's cousin, or it is dad in Mexico on the phone. Like we've had that happen where we have dad calling in. These are the kinds of things that you work out. Ideally, Robin's going to tell me she wants the principal and the teacher on the team. But if she doesn't, I'm not going to have the principal and the teacher on the team because they pick. It doesn't mean I'm blocking out principal and teacher. It means we want them to have the team of people they want at the table. So what that means is if I'm the facilitator, I'm going to have to be doing some work to help build the relationship back with Robin and teacher and Robin and administrator. Because eventually we do want them on the team, but we're not going to force it. We're going to work towards it. So then we have a team meeting. Robin comes up with what she says. We talked about our strengths and needs. She feels like, are you ready for this? She feels like the mission of this team is really that life at home is better. Notice how you can't measure that. That's like the big overarching need. Life at home is better. I had one that it was Ben will smile more. So there's this kind of big thing that the family knows they need, knows they want. And we're going to have that kind of be our mission. And then I'm going to work with Robin, and Robin is going to say, so what we would work as a team about what Robin says would help make that better. And so Robin might tell me they need a bed and a dresser and a desk for their kid. And she really thinks that's going to help her kid do better. Kid is still spitting on the playground. So we're not necessarily getting to the spitting yet, right? We're totally going with what the family says is their biggest need. And we're going to try to meet that need to get to help solve the playground problem. So we have these team meetings. We put things in place as a team. We might put a mentor in place. We might put counseling in place. We might put a bed. We might get a desk. We might, we had one kid who we had a dad who was really sick in Chicago, and really what mom thought would help would be if she got to go see her dad. She needed a train ticket. So the team works on getting her a train ticket. And that's just what we do. What they tell us is what we're working with. So this is hard and very doable. And when it is done with fidelity, we have the research to show it works. And I have personal life experiences of doing it and coaching it enough to know that when it's done well, it's like rock your world. It just has to be done with fidelity, which is why these systems pieces are so important. So the whole process of wraparound, wait a minute, I have to figure out what time it is where you are. Oh, I lost my sticky note. Okay, what time in New York do you finish today? 2?
Yeah, it's almost 2 o'clock right now. You said we're here till 3, so it's almost 2 o'clock.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I had a panic moment. Like, oh my God, do I have 4 minutes left? How did that happen? Okay, so wraparound is built on these principles. We're making sure that we're functioning, that we're culturally competent. We're making sure the team is individualized. We're making sure we're focusing on strengths. Number 9 is one of the most challenging ones, that we're unconditional. So one kid that I worked with, the RAP facilitator, we went to the principal and said, all right, unconditional with this kid is going to be it's going to be hard because you'd normally be sending this kid to alternative school. Can we have your word that unless it is really, really, really bad, we're going to stay here. We're going to keep coming back to the table. We're not going to go to alternative school. We're going to keep at it as a team. So ideally you have community involved, and natural supports means that you have people involved who aren't paid to be there, because you'll eventually go away. And we want people who are there who are not paid. So I'm going to let you read this next one before I describe Renew. And then I think we'll take a break. what questions do you have so far about wraparound? And if you don't have questions, what thoughts do you have that you can share out loud when being recorded?
I'm thinking about frequency of the meetings. I'm thinking about, tracking those supports and how we're seeing if the things that we're talking about that they need are working.
It's Carrie, right? Okay. So Carrie, those are really great questions. So once you get past the coffee chat, which is the clinician or whoever's doing the wrap, whoever's the facilitator, once you get past that, initially you're probably having team meetings once or twice a month at least. Those meetings are not like day long, they're like an hour, but they're frequent because we're at the kind of highest crisis point more than likely. So then though, Carrie, what happens is eventually it moves to once every 3 weeks and then once every 4 weeks, and it slows down. So it's the upfront that takes so much time. This is why if you were going to have a facilitator do multiple wrap plans, I wouldn't start them at the same time. I would space them out. So then the team is going to decide what kind of data they're tracking. So ultimately, Carrie, that kid who was spitting and kicking on the playground, ultimately, we started tracking things that were meaningful to her and mom. And one of those was whether or not she got to go to school-wide acknowledgement parties. She never got to go. She was in like 4th grade. She'd never been to a school-wide acknowledgement party. So we started tracking that because that was a school who didn't buy into the, the school-wide acknowledgements are meant to be in place to create community. When we exclude kids from those, we exclude the same kids over and over and over, and it doesn't change their behavior. So it's meant to be like a holiday party with the staff. We don't invite just the good teachers, right? Everybody's included. So we tracked that. Then we started tracking disruptions in the classroom and on the playground, fights. So the team decides what they're going to start tracking. And it may look different everywhere with every plan. Ultimately, I would say they almost all come back in the end to have something to do with office referrals and grades. So it doesn't always start out that way, but eventually it lands there, has been my experience. Thank you for that question. Did I answer it? What other thoughts or questions are you having? Do you want to break? Want me to keep going? Okay, do this if you want to break. All right, perfect. You want 5 minutes or 10 minutes? 5. Okay, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. 10 minutes. I'm going to have you take a 10-minute break. Carrie, you're a principal, right? I prefer that you hide under your desk with like a soda or something. Okay, don't let anyone know you're on a break. All right, everyone, if you can avoid letting know someone you're on a break, avoid letting them know. Take a break, go to the bathroom, get something to drink, eat something, meditate for 8 minutes. All right, so we'll come back at 10 after. All right. Okay. What questions or thoughts do you have about wraparound? Like, what did you think wraparound was in comparison to what I told you? What's different or the same?
I can share that it's a lot more, I think, parent or family led than I originally expected it to be, which is nice to hear about.
Yeah, Erin. Yeah. And you know what? It is completely family led and student led. And it's, how do I want to say this in a recording? It's different than we're accustomed to. It's different. And it's a little scary because we're not used to it. But yeah, some people had some comments in chat. Okay, got it. Okay, some people just didn't have any preconceived notions. So anything else?
I would say it's just more, it's open-ended than, there's a lot of different, needs or areas of focus, and that can feel overwhelming, I think.
Yeah,
Versus like a check in, check out, where it's like, here's the thing and here's the thing you're gonna do.
exactly. Here's the form. Here's what, yeah, exactly. It is very much like, it is very much open-ended, right? It doesn't, there's no like standard, it lasts this long. Like it may be 6 months, it might be 2 years. You just kind of don't know going in, not kind of, you don't know going in. That's a really great point. I generally tell people if they're going to facilitate RAP, they should wear extra deodorant. Because we're not used to going into meetings where we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what we're going to recommend, and you never know what's going to happen in a RAP meeting before you get in there. So extra deodorant is good. Anything else? I'm going to look in the chat. Yeah, it's about meeting them where they are. Yeah. It slows, it's not a quick process, right? I mean, it's big change takes time. And that's what my experience has been, is when this is done with fidelity, it's not baby change. It's like, I did RAP at the alternative school, and one of the high school students I did that with, it was life-changing, almost more for the mom than the kid. All of a sudden, the mom had supports. The mom knew she had people she could count on. And I guess in some ways it was really, really good for the kid. He ended up employed. He ended up knowing, he had a schizophrenia diagnosis. And, he learned during that time when he needed to be in the hospital and when he didn't need to be in the hospital. Like that's going to be could be a lifelong thing for him. So there was a lot of learning that happened as well. So anything else? So what I want you to know is you can do RAP K-12, early childhood 12, doesn't matter. You can do RAP, right? It's family and child driven. So if it's like a 3-year-old, it's going to look a little different than if it's a 7th grader. But you can do this with any age, really. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift gears, and I'm going to talk about Renew. So Renew stands for Resilience, Empowerment, and Natural Supports for Education and Work. Renew came about from work that was done at the University of New Hampshire, at the Institute on Disability. So there were a couple of key players, and Kathy Frankauer, Jonathan Drake, I know I'm skipping somebody and Joanne Malloy is the lead person, and I know I'm skipping somebody. So this renew process is a process they developed. So that's how person-centered planning works, right? The wraparound person-centered planning was developed and then researched, and communities did it, and it was all over the place, and it really has a ton of support behind it. Renew was developed later in time. And so Renew is very, very similar to RAP, but it's with a high school kid. So here's what I'm guessing is going to happen. You're going to leave and you're going to be like, oh, I don't want to do RAP. I want to do Renew, because there's a really, really fun part of Renew that we don't do in RAP. So, but I ask you to hang on. So this sounds like, hey, high school kid, it's great to see you. We know things have been rough. We know what we're doing isn't really working for you. We have this new process called Renew. It would mean that you and I would meet several times and I would ask you questions about your strengths and needs and dreams. And while you're talking, I would be drawing. And then we would come to a place where you develop what you want your plan to look like, what goals you want to work on. And then we'd bring people to the table to help meet those goals. It's the same process. The kid and family are in charge. High school kid being the main voice. And so it's the same process like that. What we're doing isn't working. We want to help. I never use the word team with high school kids because they freak out and say, I don't need a team. So I would say, then we'll bring people together to help kind of help you work towards your goals. So with Renew, has very similar goals and principles to, it has very similar principles to Wraparound. See those on the right. The main difference in my experience is that when you do Renew, you have 4 goals. So the kid's going to pick their goals, but it's going to fit under one of these 4 categories: high school completion, employment, post-secondary education, and being a community member. So all of our goals are going to fall in a category under those. So people want to do this with 6th graders because they love this drawing part that I'm about to show you. But 6th graders are much different than 10th graders. 6th graders aren't thinking about post-secondary training. High school kids need to be thinking about post-secondary training. I mean, I know in junior high, we start looking, right? But this means like we're going to put in, we may end up putting in a work study program. We may put in all kinds of different things to help a student meet goals meet their goals that are falling under these 4 categories. You can't do that with a 6th grader because a 6th grader is not ready to talk about employment. Also, when we are doing Wraparound, it is family and youth voice driven. When we do Renew, it is youth voice driven with family. This is one of the other experiences that I have had, is that people will be like, I don't want to do RAP, I want to do Renew because I can kind of circumvent the parents. Although that's never been the intention. Joanne Malloy would weep in her wheeze if she heard somebody who said, I don't want to do RAP, I want to do Renew because I want to circumvent the parents. But that's what people do because there's less family engagement and involvement. But we do know high school kids still have to have family involvement and family engagement. So it's not getting rid of family engagement. It looks a little different. Because what we're doing is helping this kid identify their goals around high school employment, post-secondary training, and community inclusion. So we use a bunch of different strategies in Renew. And they're pretty similar to Wraparound, with the exception of the number 1, which is called personal futures planning. So I'm going to show you that in a minute, but you would do this personal futures planning with the kid, and then you would develop the team, and then you would work on resources and programming and career kind of planning. And you're probably going to end up with some mentoring pieces in there. And we want to make sure that this kid is connected in their community. So it is a little different. So here's the biggest difference I'm going to show you. And then we're gonna get this part out of the way. I love this part, but I hate that it ends up being the part everyone wants to do. But I understand why. Okay, so give me a second. I need to stop sharing. I'm not sharing anymore, am I? Ooh, no wonder. Okay. I think you're going to see all your faces for a second. Do you see your faces? You don't see your faces. Give me 1 second. I'm really challenged here. I have had tutoring. I've watched videos. I still have tier 3 needs. I wonder. Okay. All right, now you see my big head. How about okay. Thank you for your patience. Wants to repair the PowerPoint. It's not gonna let me do it. Thank you for your patience. You're all like, we're not feeling patient. Okay, it's not gonna let me do it. So I'm gonna go to our website and look for it there. I'm gonna go to Midwest PBIS. No, I'm not. I'm going to go to my Google Drive. I'm so happy you all get to witness this drama here. I'm not sure why you're not seeing my screen, but in a minute you will. Okay, maybe not. It's not letting me open it. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to explain it to you, and then I'm going to send you the pictures of it, okay? Because I want you to be able to see it. Okay. Awkward. Okay, could you all like turn away from the camera for a moment? Oh, I'm so glad this is being recorded. Okay, what do you see now? See the whole PowerPoint. Okay, we may have to stick here. There's not a ton of slides left. I know that you can see this side of those, but I think I don't want to waste your time anymore. Okay, I'm not going to waste your time anymore. We're going to just keep going. Okay, I'm back. Thank you. Sorry. So when you do renew, after you have the conversation with the kid about doing this new process, what happens is then there are what are called maps that you do with the kid. And maps are, another way to say maps are big, giant pieces of sticky paper on a wall where you write a title of what you're going to talk about. And then you ask the kid some questions. And as the kid talks, you draw. So for instance, tell me about your history. I have history written at the top of the map. And the kid may start with, well, I was born and then I moved 15 times and now I'm in 12th grade. Or they may say, I was born and then I turned 2 And then when I was 3, my parents got divorced. And when I was 5, we had a fire. And when I was 8, we had this. And so I'm drawing. I have a hand tremor. I'm the world's worst person to draw something, like super shaky. And you know what? It really doesn't matter, because the kids will know what you mean, because they're seeing their words. So it's super powerful for someone to draw what you're saying, because you see it and reflect on it differently. So you would talk about your history, you would talk about your dreams, you would talk about your goals, you would talk about who's in your inner circle, in your outer circle, in your circle out here, and who's not helpful in your life. So there's a set of maps that you do. So the history map is one, dreams and goals, dreams is one. And you go through this, and what ends up happening is you really have, no pun intended, a roadmap with the kid about what their life has looked like. So every time you meet with the kid to do one of those maps, you have the other maps up. So they can go back and they can experience those other, like, oh, I forgot to tell you that this friend should go in that circle. Or I forgot to tell you that when I was 5, this happened. I didn't tell you before. And so you're reading those maps. So every time they're with you, they're getting this vision of where they've come from. And then they identify where they want to go. And where they want to go is what you build the team around. So it could be, I want to go to community college. It could be, I just want to find out about community college. It could be, I want to be a firefighter. It could be a million things that a kid can come up with. And it might be that the kid needs credits, and that kid's Renew team is gonna start working on getting the kid to go to the firehouse so many hours a day and earn credits. Like, it takes flexibility to do this work. And that's what this means here in number 4, flexible or alternative programming. We're gonna look at all kinds of things. This is one of the reasons you need that tier 3 systems conversation, because you're going to need help, because it's probably going to look outside the box. So it wasn't a student I worked with, but I know a student who was so far behind on PE credits, wasn't going to graduate. He loved camping. He ended up going on a camping trip, writing about it and getting his credits, right? Like, they found ways to make it work. It's really, really cool to see a kid get to the point where they recognize that they have some control over what direction things are going to go for them, and that they have a group of people who are their team. So, hi, what we're doing, is it working? We're going to do all these maps together. Then we do the maps, then we get a team together, and then it's wrap. It's just like wrap after that. So you're working on whatever he or she or they want to work on. That's where your team is going to go. So the flexible piece is so important. This is credit recovery will undoubtedly come up. Grades will come up. Work study will come up. Kids who are in classes where they do all their work on the computer. This happened in one of the districts where I supported Renew. They could catch up with credits online in this one class period during the day, but the reading level was set so high that the kid could not possibly do the work. And it took the Renew team to get that fixed, because the counselor had worked on it for a long time and hadn't been able to get it fixed. So it took that Renew team coming in. So it's really driven by the kid. We really want the kid to feel confident, and we really want them to see hope, and that they can have, that they have some control over their future. It is intended to help build social resources for them. It's not a program, it's not a course, it's not a class. It's like wraparound. It's a person-centered planning process with the addition of that mapping of the person of the maps. That's how I'm going to say it. So there is the connection. I think I've made it between wraparound and Renew. when we think about training for these things, so I'm going to tell you the history of training, and then I'm going to tell you the direction that hopefully we're going to start moving. So the history of this is you come to a training, probably a 12, 14-hour training over a couple of days or whatever. And we do the work, we practice. So in RAP, we practice having RAP team meetings. In Renew, we practice the drawing part and team meetings. And then you leave the training, and your intention when you leave is you're going to go do the work. But what we see happen over and over is people don't leave and go do the work because that system stuff gets in the way. So the way we're moving, the direction we're moving at Midwest is we're going to set up a training that lasts all year. And the training is going to be broken into chunks. So here's this little piece about wraparound or renew. And now what I want you to do is I want you to go do that with the kid. And then when you come back, I'm going to give you a little bit more to go do. And so it's going to be content and technical assistance throughout the time together. Not everyone is doing it that way. It doesn't have to be done that way, but we want more people to do the work, and we want to make sure they have the support they need. So when we have facilitator training, it is really intended for that person to go do the work. It's not intended to be something that is just an overview. The facilitator training is intended for people to leave and go do the work. So the qualities of the facilitator really, really matter. This is like check in, check out. A, they need to like kids. B, they need to not be so fried that they don't have space. I would say bandwidth, but that's on my list on the wall of things not to say. So they need to like kids, and they need to have the kind of capacity at this point in time to do the work. So that has changed, right, over the last few years for most of us. So it's something we have to take into account. The RAP or Renew facilitator is really regularly checking in to see if they're following the principles of the process. And their job is to engage and connect with the families, get the needs assessment done, help create the team, facilitate the team meetings, and look at fidelity and data. So the job of this person, the roles and how to select this person, we have some documents for you to look at. So about selecting the qualities and attributes that you could use when you're selecting. I think the most important 1, 2, 3 are they like kids, they want to do the work, and someone's helping make space in their day for them to do the work. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but please don't ever make someone do RAP or Renew, because it will backfire. One facilitator could possibly support 2 to 3 youth. As I mentioned earlier, the further along you get into the process, the less time you end up spending. Some people are going to do more, some people need less. And what we learned in the Renew study was you can count on 1.5 to 2 hours a week doing Renew. And I think at the beginning you could count that for wraparound. Here's what I want you to know though. You are more than likely already spending this time on that kid and family. You're doing all kinds of things for this kid and the family. You're just doing it differently than this. So this is about like, okay, how do we not do that so we can do this? How do we repurpose our time? So instead of spending 500 hours in crisis or whatever, right, we're going to spend 5 hours doing a coffee chat, right? And it may be that the coffee chat alone helps reduce some of the problem behaviors. So I know this is very vague. It just depends. It depends on the kid and the family, and it depends on what people have taken off their plate. Because it is unrealistic to think anybody's just going to add this to their already plate that's overflowing, right? So it's something that systems team and the district systems team really needs to talk through. there are a couple of different types of data that we use when we do wraparound and renew. We're going to use, so we already talked a little bit about this earlier when Sherry asked that question, but grades, attendance, referrals, those sorts of things, the check-in, check-out cards that kids use, that's all data that we're going to use, and that will be determined by the kids' individual team. Then ideally, we get some perception data. We did this a lot with wraparound, where we came up with a way to get the perception of the family and of the teacher and of the kid about how things were going. And then the fidelity piece. And both wrap and renew each have a fidelity measure. And that measure helps you determine if you're following all of the pieces of the process in a way that is going to equal success. So generally, in wrap, we have a sheet that looks like this. There's no mandatory sheet, but this is just a sheet that we use a lot of times. Like, we're going to measure these things for this student: baseline, time 2, time 3, time 4, because we are going to talk about data in those team meetings. And that is, of course, outcome data. Perception data is generally, we can give you examples of those if you were going to do wraparound. And then fidelity at tier 3, I mentioned, is are we doing what we say we're going to do? The fidelity really comes up in the conversation with the tier 3 systems conversation. Like, are we really doing this with fidelity? I really do have examples of where a facilitator will say, a facilitator didn't want to do it, will say, it's not working. And then I look at their documentation, and they haven't met with the kid in like 3 months. So that's a fidelity problem. So that systems team is going to have all these conversations about, are we getting enough kids? Are facilitators getting what they need to do the work? And is it being implemented? So there are some copies of the integrity tool. I'm going to show you where to find all of these in a minute, but there are some copies of the integrity tool on the website that I'm going to show you. And then in a minute, I'm also going to show you what we refer to as the district readiness guide. So if you were a district administrator or a district coach, or you wanted to start talking about having a district team, this would be the things that you would be looking for in terms of being ready to add tier 3. And then we also have the same piece at a building. So you can see here, do we have that basic 2 years of fidelity at tier 1 in place? Because remember, tier 3 is going to build on tier 1 and tier 2. Are our team members knowledgeable? Do we have coaching? Do we have an administrator who's participating? Are we committed to looking at fidelity? Do we have a protocol of how we're going to find kids who need tier 3? Has the kid, have we worked it out that we know how many tier 2 interventions a kid has had before we're looking at tier 3? So there are these tier 3 readiness guides for the district and the building. And I really would suggest you look at them, because if they aren't in place, eventually you're going to want them in place. So we know if you have them in place, it goes better. I'm going to tell you though, it's top secret. Top secret information is, I did wraparound before I knew what PBIS was. It makes it a lot harder, but it is possible. It just makes it a lot harder. And it just makes it, I don't know, I can't say less likely to succeed, but definitely harder. Everybody in the world could benefit from having a wrap team. Everybody, right? Can you imagine, like, hey, what I need is to eat less chocolate. I need to do yoga more consistently. I need to do better with the laundry. Like, I need, all kinds of things, right? That I think are my needs. Imagine having a team of people who were your cheerleaders, who met with you and said, how can we help you eat less chocolate? right? I mean, I'm giving a goofy example, but that's what really happens with this is people have their own team of humans behind them. The little third grade girl, this kid that was spitting and hitting and kicking, after her first team meeting, she wrote a thank you note to every team member. Thank you for being my team. Like, it's like, it'll, some of this stuff blows you out of the water. One of the facilitators I worked with in Renew, it was her last year. She was retiring. She was very, very hesitant about doing the work. She was in one of those places where they tell you to do the work. So they told her she had to do it. And so she was a great clinician. And she's like, okay, I'm going to do it. I don't want it, but I'm going to do it. And what she told me at the end of that year was it was the best work she'd done and the best year she'd ever had as a clinician. Because what she saw was a change that was huge. What she saw was then the ability to work with the district attorney and the ability to go to court with a kid and help them in a different way, in ways that were going to make big life outcome changes. So I'm going to try one more thing about sharing my screen. I'm going to end showing you this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the PBIS website. Okay, let's see if this works. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to walk you through it. All right. Ah, magic. All right, so this is the Midwest PBIS website. So you'll notice if you used to look at our website, now it's Midwest PBIS and the number 2.org because we're in the middle of overhauling our website. So here is the website for Midwest PBIS Network. And the information for Renew, I'm going to show you what we have on our website, but then I'm going to really encourage you to go to the University of New Hampshire's website and check out that piece about Renew. So up here at the top, home, coaches, mental health, integration, events, and training content. And training content, you're going to go down to tier 3. And on the left-hand side, you're going to see all of those readiness documents. So you click on readiness, and here are the checklists. Here's some other resources. And let's see, then let's go back. Or you could click on wraparound. And what you'll see is information about what the training looks like, including the training materials. So when you do wraparound training, we give you lots of tools that you could use if you wanted, and those are all here. So when we're doing tier 3 work, we're generally looking at 3 overarching life domains: homeschool and community. This breaks those down. So when we're doing wrap or renew, we're more than likely looking at all of these areas in the kid and family's life to see where we can provide help, which is completely different than how we normally are able to do business. The tier 3 facilitator qualities that I showed you, those are here under wraparound. And let's see, I'm going to go back up and take you to renew. So when you go here to renew, you click on learn more. There is a really great video if you wanted to watch it about renew. This was done as part of the federal study. The link here for the University of New Hampshire is here that would take you there. And then some of the training materials and documents are here. So when we train Renew, we use UNH materials. So it's not creating anything new. It's using what they use, what they want us to use, and what they know has been the most successful for them. It will be a miracle. Okay, you're not going to get to see the drawing, but I'm going to show you what the questions are for those maps. So they are your history. So this is for kids in Renew after we've talked to them about participating and they've agreed and we've got the family on board. We're going to do a map about their history. And this is what the big piece of art paper looks like. And then we're going to do, who are you today? And then you have some prompts. You're not going to ask them like, I have 6 questions to ask you. You're going to ask to get them talking. And then here's what the giant piece of paper will look like, because you're going to draw a really cute star man and you're going to make sure it does not look like a marijuana leaf. And then in map number 3, strengths and accomplishments. And then we have the map example. Map number 4, people and resources in your life. And then you do the circle map, which you maybe already do with kids. Who am I closest to? I could call on any time. Who are people I have good relationships with, but I wouldn't call in the middle of the night? Who are people that are in my life, but are paid to be in my life? And then on the outside, it's who's in my life that is not a good influence on me. Map number 5, what works and what doesn't work. This is fascinating, what kids in high school describe as good instruction and bad instruction. Good instruction on one side, bad instruction on the other side. Map number 6 is, what are my dreams? Anything, nothing's off limits. What are my dreams? And the dreams map is just blank. Then map number 7, what are my worries? So this is generally a really hard map to do with kids because their worries they're real, right? I mean, they're real and they're worries for a reason. And it's a hard one to do. It's not one you do and send a kid immediately back to class. And then we have them come up with their goals. And then an action plan. Then we get our team together. So what ends up happening is, well, I thought I'd look one more time for that. Okay, so what ends up happening is, so I used to be a private practice therapist and I worked mostly with adolescents. And I can tell you without a doubt that doing maps with teenagers got me further faster than anything I ever did as a therapist. Because it's really not threatening. They don't have to look you in the eye. You're distracted because you're drawing. And the questions and the prompts that Joanne and the UNH team came up with are really brilliant. It really does kind of get them, it does get them really started. All right, I'm going to try one more time because I wanted you to see those. If not, I'm going to ask Jay to send them to you. That's not what I wanted. Okay, one more try, then we're quitting this business of Amy trying to find something to show you that will actually open. I feel like it's gonna work this time. Let's see if it'll work in Google Slides. All right, well, I'm gonna send it to you. So with the PowerPoint are the 2 readiness checklists and the facilitator attributes, and I'll send the portfolio of the maps so that you can see what they look like. You're definitely going to remember if you want to do Renew that it's not just maps. That's kind of where we get hung up with Renew is people are like, oh, I did the maps, I'm done. And that's the easy fun part. It's the hard, teaming is the hard part. So what I'd like to do now is, what questions do you have? What do you think you're ready? Are you ready to jump in and start going to facilitator training? What do you think? And Jay, I'm going to stop the recording so people can talk freely here.